the desert held its breath, and it felt wrong. Heat shimmered above the firing lanes, bending the air like glass. Young recruits shifted uneasily, their earlier laughter thinning as the old man stepped forward. To them, he was a relic stooped shoulders, a jacket bleached pale by decades of sun, a rifle that looked like scrap iron painted red. Hands scarred by age moved with deliberate calm, as if time itself slowed for him. Something in his gaze froze the air. It wasn't defiance, and it wasn't fear. It was weight history, pressed into a single moment. The recruits smirked, phones half raised, but the range officer's eyes stayed fixed, sensing a storm behind the stillness. A single shot cracked, and everything shifted. And as the echo faded, one question hung in the burning air. Did he miss? The range. Midday glare shimmered across the Arizona desert, bending the horizon into waves of light. Dust clung to boots and rifles, coating everything in a thin film of grit. It was the kind of heat that tested patience more than endurance. On the firing line at Fort Ironwood Base, recruits lined up in crisp fatigues, their voices carried in bursts of laughter and bravado. Another training cycle, another chance to prove they were sharp shooters in the making. But their attention had shifted. At the far end of the range, an old man stood quietly. He looked carved out of another era, small frame, worn jacket, a rifle so battered it seemed like a museum relic. His name was Walt Granger, 84 years old. His back was slightly bent, but his steps were sure. He carried no tactical gear, no modern optics, only the old weapon in his hands. The rifle drew stares. Its paint was brick red, faded and scarred, with a stock etched by faint markings nearly rubbed away. Whatever they once meant was now just shadowed lines, wings spread, talons gripping something lost to time. Snickers ran down the line of recruits. Looks like a toy, someone muttered. Another nudged his buddy, phone already aimed to catch the spectacle. Captain Miles Carter, the range officer, moved closer. His voice stayed even, but his eyes tracked every detail. Mr. Granger, the line is ready. Take your shot. Walt didn't answer. He lowered himself onto the wooden bench, careful but steady, every motion practiced. Not rushed, not hesitant, simply deliberate. The recruits grinned wider, whispering bets about misfires or dropped cartridges. They expected embarrassment, not accuracy. Walt slid a single round into the chamber. The metallic click rang sharp, louder than the desert wind. He brought the rifle to his shoulder, cheek resting against the scarred stock, and peered through the old, scratched scope. Through the glass, he locked onto the far steel plate, 3,200 meters farther than most of the young men could imagine hitting. The laughter faded. Silence crept across the line, brittle and uneasy. Walt exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the range, echo rolling off the low hills. Dust jumped near the target, faint but visible. To the naked eye, it was wide. A miss. Clean. Laughable. The recruits erupted instantly. Nice try, Grandpa, one yelled. Another pantomimed recoil, staggering backward with fake drama. Phones tilted higher, eager to record every mocking cheer. Walt lowered the rifle and set it on the bench. His face gave nothing away, not shame, not pride, only stillness. He rested his forearms on the wood, eyes fixed on the horizon, not on the recruits, not on Carter. The distance seemed to claim his attention, as if he were waiting for an answer only he could hear. Carter frowned. He'd seen arrogance, he'd seen hesitation, but he hadn't seen calm like this. Guy doesn't even care he missed, a recruit muttered. Probably can't see straight. The laughter flickered again, but thinner this time. Walt didn't blink. His gaze stayed locked far beyond the paper silhouettes. For a heartbeat, the air shifted concrete dust, gun oil, a spotter's whisper. Images flared sharp, then vanished like ghosts behind glass. Carter drew in a breath and straightened. Check the target, he ordered, voice firm. A range assistant started forward, but the recruits cut him off with scoffing grins. No need, one called. Target's clean. Old man couldn't hit a truck. The line broke into laughter again, though not as loud as before. But Carter didn't move. His instinct itched something wasn't adding up. He turned toward the jeep idling at the edge of the range. Hold the line, he told his sergeant. No one fires until I confirm. The recruits exchanged uncertain glances, amusement slipping. Why waste time on a clear miss? Walt remained steady at the bench. The barrel still carried faint heat. He exhaled softly, chest rising and falling like a tide. Phones dipped lower. confidence ebbing. The desert heat pressed harder, as if the range itself was holding its breath. Carter climbed into the jeep and drove toward the far targets. The recruits watched him shrink into the wavering horizon, jokes dying in their throats, replaced by restless silence. Walt never moved. His hands rested loosely, his gaze still on the far steel. He had stood in this place before in different deserts, under different skies. The only difference was the audience. These young men didn't yet understand what precision looked like. They would. Soon enough. At the target, Carter stepped out. Through binoculars, the recruits saw him lean close, his hand tracing something invisible to their eyes. When he straightened, his shoulders were stiff. The radio at his belt crackled. His voice came through steady, but edged with tension. "Hold the line. Mr. Granger, I need you to fire again." The recruits blinked, stunned. Why ask for another shot? The target should have been clean. Walt's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more the faint recognition of a familiar pattern. He reached for another round. The weight of the moment settled over the range like a storm rolling in. The jeep roared back across the desert floor, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. Captain Carter climbed out slowly, his face drawn tight, eyes fixed on Walter Granger. The recruits fell into uneasy silence, their earlier bravado thinning like smoke. Carter walked closer, boots grinding on gravel. "Mr. Granger," he said evenly, "that last shot wasn't a miss. Dead center." The words cut through the line like a blade. Murmurs broke. "That's impossible," one recruit whispered. Another swallowed hard, lowering his phone without realizing it. Private Ethan Ross, taller than the rest, forced a laugh. "One lucky hit doesn't make him a sniper. Let him prove it." His voice carried challenge, but his eyes flickered with doubt. Carter's jaw tightened. 3,500 meters. One more shot. The order left no room for protest. Walt didn't hesitate. He slid another round into the chamber, bolt locking with a crisp click that echoed sharper than the desert wind. The recruits leaned forward, nervous now instead of mocking. Some shuffled their feet, unsure if they wanted to see what came next. Only Ross still forced a smirk. Walt pressed the rifle to his shoulder. His breathing slowed, each inhale measured, each exhale deliberate. Through the old scratched scope, the world narrowed to one thin circle. He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, rolling like thunder across the barren flats. Dust puffed again at the target's edge, another miss to the naked eye. Ross barked a laugh, relief spilling out. "See? Told you." Fluke shot. But his grin faltered when Carter raised his binoculars. The officer's hands trembled slightly. Through the lenses, the steel plate told a different story. The hole from before had deepened, edges fracturing like glass under pressure. Carter lowered the binoculars, his voice hard. "Mr. Granger, once more." The recruits stilled. Walt loaded the third round. No hesitation, no ceremony, just the quiet rhythm of a man who had done this too many times. As he settled into position, the desert dissolved around him. The heat gave way to a knife-edged cold. Snow lashed at his face, biting and merciless. He lay prone on a frozen ridge, rifle digging into the ice. Breath fogged the glass of his scope. A voice crackled faintly through the radio. "Ghost Eye, movement downslope. Our squad's pinned. 3 shooters behind cover. If you can't clear them, they'll call mortars." His hands were numb, but steady. He adjusted for crosswind, screaming at 40 knots. Adjusted again for steep angle, 30 degrees down. His heartbeat slowed to a crawl. He fired. One muzzle flash vanished in the snow. Another round chambered. The second enemy folded into the drifts. The last scrambled for cover, but Walt was already tracking him. He led the movement by fractions of an inch and fired. The man collapsed. Silence returned to the ridge. His spotter's voice broke, shaking with relief. "All clear. Medevac inbound. You just saved 11 men." Walt lowered the rifle, hands trembling not from fear, but from cold he'd ignored for 20 minutes. He whispered into the frozen wind, unheard by anyone. "God forgive me for being good at this." The prayer vanished in the blizzard. The desert heat slammed back into his lungs. Walt exhaled, finger steady on the trigger. He fired the third round. The sound cracked like judgment. At the line, recruits squinted, unsure. Dust shimmered again, faint and misleading. But Carter was already running for the jeep. He drove hard, tires throwing up grit, closing the distance fast. The recruits watched in taut silence, nerves clawing at their chests. Ross tried to joke, but no one laughed. A few recruits shifted back, unease prickling. The air felt heavier than the sun alone could make it. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, Carter's voice came over the radio, clipped and tense. 3 rounds, same hole. The steel is splitting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Phones lowered to sides. Eyes darted between Walt and the target. Ross's face drained of color. His hand twitched as if reaching for his dropped phone, but he didn't pick it up. One recruit whispered, "That's not possible." But Carter's return left no room for denial. He stepped out of the jeep, sweat streaking his brow, binoculars dangling useless at his chest. His gaze stayed locked on Walt. The old man rose slowly, the rifle slung with ease across his shoulder. No gloating, no smile, just the same steady presence as before. Carter stopped a few feet away. His voice had lost its edge. "Where did you serve, sir?" Walt's gaze met his, calm and unreadable. "Places that don't exist, with men whose names you'll never know." The recruits shivered, though the desert still burned. Carter's eyes drifted to the rifle stock. The faint engraving caught the light wings spread, talons clutching a bolt. Recognition struck like a blow. Task Force Raven, a name buried in classified files, half rumor, half myth. A unit that never officially existed. Carter's chest tightened. He'd read about them once. Lines redacted, operations whispered but never confirmed. Most of those men had never come home. He looked back at Walt with new eyes. Not at an old man, but at a survivor of wars erased from history. Behind them, engines rumbled. Black SUVs approaching fast. The recruits stiffened, sensing something far beyond their world of drills and uniforms. Carter keyed his radio, voice low. "Command, range 7. We have a situation." His eyes stayed locked on Walt as he spoke. The old man adjusted the strap of his rifle. "I came to shoot," he murmured. "I've done that. Now I'll be leaving." But Carter knew it wouldn't be that simple anymore. The horizon shimmered with heat and dust. Ghosts from Walt's past were already closing in, and this time, they weren't coming to let him walk away. The black SUVs screeched to a halt, throwing up plumes of dust. Doors slammed in unison, and out stepped Major Colton Briggs, uniform crisp, eyes sharp as glass. Behind him, 2 civilians emerged. One was a woman in her 50s, tailored suit, hair pinned tight, the weight of Washington in her stare. The other carried a slim case and a permanent frown. Carter stiffened to attention. "Major Briggs, sir." But the officer's gaze was fixed on Walter Granger. More precisely, on the rifle slung across his shoulder. Briggs's face lost its color. His lips moved with a whisper not meant to be heard. "Ghost Eye." The recruits shifted, puzzled by the name. Ross frowned, finally too nervous to mock. Carter asked carefully, "Sir?" "What does that mean?" Briggs didn't answer. Instead, his voice cracked like a whip. "Confiscate every phone, every camera, right now." Sergeants moved instantly, collecting devices from stunned recruits. Protests died at a single glare from Briggs. Ross handed his phone over reluctantly, shame biting deeper than fear. The line of young men stood awkward, unsure what they had just witnessed. This was no longer training. Briggs stepped forward slowly, boots crunching the gravel. He stopped 3 feet from Walt, eyes locked. "You should have stayed gone." Walt didn't blink. The rifle hung loose at his side, but his posture was steady, carved from the desert itself. "I came to shoot," he said quietly. "That's all." His tone was final, but Briggs pressed. "You split steel at 3,500 meters with an antique rifle. 3 shots, 1 hole. That isn't casual. It's memory," Walt replied. "Muscle memory doesn't last 40 years, Briggs snapped. The woman in the suit stepped closer, her voice precise. "Mr. Granger, we're not here to argue. We need to debrief you. Washington wants answers." Her eyes searched his face as though she could pry them out. Walt's gaze flicked to her, then past her. His silence stretched until it became answer enough. The civilian man opened his case, pulling out a file. He read names, dates, operations, half of them redacted. Task Force Raven, Operation Nightfall, codename Ghost Eye. "That's you, isn't it?" The recruits stiffened. Even Carter's breath caught. The words felt heavy, forbidden. Walt's eyes narrowed faintly. "I told them to burn those files." The civilian smirked. "Some embers survive." Briggs leaned in, voice hard. "You could train a generation with what you know. That's why we're here. You don't get to walk away." Walt's reply was soft, but iron in tone. "I already did, 30 years ago. His hand brushed the scarred stock, tracing the faint raven etched there. This rifle belonged to Marcus Chen, my spotter. He died covering me in '83 in an operation that officially never happened. Before he bled out, he made me promise I'd never let the rifle rust. Said it was the only thing keeping him alive. The words hushed the air. Even the desert wind faltered. The recruits stared, shame growing like a weight on their shoulders. Ross swallowed, guilt written across his face. "Sir, we didn't know. You weren't meant to," Walt said. His voice carried neither anger nor forgiveness, only fact. The woman pressed again, and for the first time, her composure cracked. "Mr. Granger, please. Our men are dying in the field. Training with your methods could save lives." Her voice broke on the last word. Walt's eyes softened, just slightly. "I watched men die beside me, watched others live because of me. You think you want my training? What you want is the burden that comes with it." He shook his head slowly. "It's 10,000 hours in the worst places on Earth. It's breathing steady when your body begs to freeze. It's carrying every shot, every face, into your dreams." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That isn't training. That's damnation. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone." The words sank like lead. Carter stepped forward carefully. "Maybe the question isn't how he shoots. Maybe it's why he still can. At 84, with a rifle that old, in heat that would shake most men, what keeps that kind of precision alive?" For the first time, Walt met his eyes directly. A flicker of respect crossed his expression. "The captain understands more than your brass does, Major." Briggs's jaw clenched. "Enough philosophy. You're coming with us." His hand brushed his holster, reflexive, unthinking, Walt noticed. He shifted the rifle, not in threat, but as if to remind them what he was. "Going to shoot me, Major? Over secrets you buried yourselves?" The woman laid a hand on Briggs's arm, voice low. "Don't. He's not the enemy." The tension eased, but only slightly. Walt straightened slowly, every joint showing its years but not his resolve. "You want to know why I'm here? To see if I still remembered how to carry the weight. To honor a promise to a dead man. That's all." He adjusted the rifle strap. The recruits stood stiff, silent. Phones gone, pride gone, only awe remained. They were looking at history they weren't supposed to see. Walt stepped past Carter, past Briggs. The line parted instinctively, no orders needed. No one dared block him. At the edge of the range, a young private, barely 20, fresh-faced and shaken, finally called out, "Sir, was it worth it?" The question hung trembling in the hot air. Walt paused, turning back slowly. His gaze found the boys, heavy and unflinching. "For the lives it saved, yes. For the ones I missed, those never leave. You'll understand that one day. I hope you don't." The private lowered his eyes, throat tight. Walt gave a faint nod, then faced the horizon again. He began walking, steady and unhurried. The desert seemed to bow around him, swallowing his shadow. Briggs stood rigid, fists clenched, powerless. The civilians said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Carter watched until Walt's figure blurred into the shimmering heat. A single thought burned in his chest. Some ghosts don't fade, they just wait to be seen. The black SUVs idled in the fading light, engines humming low. Major Briggs stood beside his vehicle, phone pressed tight to his ear, voice carrying the weight of a man caught between orders and ghosts. "Yes, sir. I saw it myself. 3 rounds, same hole, 3,500 meters. No," he refused, debriefing. "Yes, I understand the risk." He ended the call slowly, face drawn and pale. The desert heat seemed colder now. The Pentagon woman stepped closer. "You're letting him walk." Her tone was clipped, disbelief edging her words. Briggs rubbed his forehead, exhausted. "Do I have a choice? He's a civilian. And if we push, it turns into an incident. Washington doesn't want incidents with legends." His eyes followed the horizon where Walt had disappeared. The woman pressed again. "He could train our next generation. He could save lives." Briggs shook his head. "You heard him. He doesn't want to teach. Maybe he's right, maybe some things are too heavy to pass on." His voice faltered on the last word. The desert carried it away like dust. Nearby, Captain Carter stood with a tablet, a secure file glowing on the screen. "Ease" only stamped across the header. Subject: Walter Granger. Codename Ghost Eye Service Record 1968-199, 1 heavily redacted. Confirmed operations. Task Force Raven divided by Operation Nightfall longest recorded shot. 2000, 940 meters. Unofficial. Decorations. Redacted psychological profile. Severe PTSD. Survivor's guilt. Refusal of honors. Status. Honorably discharged. 1,991. Current location. Unknown hours. Carter's throat tightened. This wasn't just skill, this was a man the system tried to erase. He looked up at the recruits still standing in formation. Their arrogance had evaporated, leaving only silence. Even Ross's eyes carried regret. Ross stepped forward hesitantly, voice cracking under the weight of shame. "Sir, what do we do now?" Carter closed the tablet, slipping it under his arm. You remember what you saw today, even if the record says it never happened. You let that shame turn you into better soldiers." Ross swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." The words sounded more like a vow than a response. Briggs climbed back into his SUV, door slamming shut. Before leaving, he looked at Carter one last time. "That file? Delete it. This never happened." Carter nodded slowly, though his eyes said otherwise. The convoy rolled away, engines fading into the distance. Dust hung in the air long after they were gone. The recruits were dismissed, but none of them moved quickly. They walked back toward the barracks in uneasy silence. Phones returned, but every recording wiped clean. What remained was memory and a scar of shame none of them would forget. They had mocked a ghost and lived to regret it. Carter stayed behind, standing alone at the firing bench. The wood was still warm from where Walt had Saturday. 3 spent casings gleamed in the sand beside it. He bent down and picked one up. The brass caught the dying light, scratched but perfect, not just a bullet case, but evidence of the impossible. He slipped it into his pocket, fingers lingering on the metal. A reminder, a secret carried forward. At the far end of the range, the steel target leaned crooked, split clean down the center. 1 hole, 3 rounds, proof of something beyond ordinary skill. The desert wind eased to a whisper. Shadows stretched long across the sand. Carter looked toward the horizon, his voice barely audible. "Some ghosts don't fade. They wait to be seen." The words vanished into the twilight. The desert gave no answer. He turned back toward the base, boots crunching in the silence. Behind him, the sun slid below the hills. And somewhere out there, Walter Granger walked a lone rifle across his shoulder, promise still alive, memory still burning.